The transport ship shuddered as it entered the atmosphere of Draxus Prime, and Claire Mitchell gripped her seat with white knuckles. 6 months ago, she'd been working with kids back on Earth Colony 7. Now she was heading toward the palace of the most feared ruler in 3 galaxies, about to take a job that 47 people had already quit. The pay was insane. That's what kept her going. Her sister needed medical treatments that cost more than Claire would make in 10 years back home. When the recruitment officer said the Draconis Empire was hiring human staff, Claire jumped at it. They didn't mention until later that she'd be working with the Emperor's son. They really didn't mention that every single person before her had lasted less than a week. The palace was massive, all black stone and gold accents that caught the 3 suns overhead. Dragon guards stood at every entrance, their scales gleaming, their eyes tracking her with obvious disdain. Claire had seen dragons before, of course. Everyone had since first contact 20 years ago. But seeing them in their own territory was different. They were huge, powerful, and they made sure you knew it. The human, one guard said, not even looking at her directly. Follow. They led her through corridors that echoed with her footsteps. Everything was built on a scale meant for beings twice her size. She felt like a child wandering through a museum built by giants. Finally, they stopped outside an ornate door. The prince is inside. You will attend to his needs. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not touch him. You will not. A crash from inside cut him off, followed by a high-pitched sound that made Claire's chest tighten. It wasn't quite a scream. It was something worse, something raw and hurting. You will begin now, the guard said, and opened the door. The room was chaos. A young dragon, maybe equivalent to a 12-year-old human, was pressed into the corner. His scales were a beautiful silver blue, but he was clawing at his own arms, rocking back and forth. Furniture was overturned. Scorch marks blackened one wall. And in the middle of it all stood a tall dragon woman in formal robes, her face twisted in frustration. I cannot work with this creature, the woman hissed. He is beyond help. Beyond reason. She stormed past Claire without a second glance. The door slammed shut, and suddenly Claire was alone with Prince Owen, who was making that terrible sound and hurting himself. Every instinct screamed at her to rush over, to comfort him, to stop him from scratching. But Claire had worked with kids like this before. Well, human kids. But pain was pain, and overload was overload, no matter what species you were. She looked around the room. Huge windows let in blazing sunlight. Ceremonial gongs hung on the walls. The floor was polished stone that reflected every light source. The air smelled like incense, thick and cloying. And from somewhere nearby, she could hear the rhythmic pounding of drums from what must be a state function. Too bright. Too loud. Too much. Claire slowly moved to the windows and closed the heavy curtains. The room dimmed. She found the incense burner and moved it to the hallway. Then she just sat down on the floor, her back against the wall opposite Owen, and waited. The prince's rocking slowed slightly. The terrible sound quieted to a whimper. Claire pulled out her tablet and started a simple game, the kind with predictable patterns and soft sounds. She didn't look at Owen. Didn't speak. Just existed in the same space, calm and quiet. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Her legs cramped, but she didn't move. Finally, Owen's breathing evened out. The scratching stopped. In the dim light, Claire could see his eyes were closed, his body exhausted from the meltdown. What she didn't know was that in a monitoring room 3 floors up, Emperor Draven was watching the camera feeds in stunned silence. He'd watched his son have these episodes for years. He'd watched tutors try to restrain him, medicate him, punish him. He'd watched his own wife give up in frustration before her death. But this human woman did nothing. Just sat there. And his son calmed. What is she doing? He demanded. His head advisor, a scarred veteran named General Thane, shook his head. Nothing, my lord. That's the problem. She's doing nothing. Then why is it working? No one had an answer. Down in the prince's chambers, Owen's eyes slowly opened. He saw Claire across the room, still sitting quietly. She met his gaze and offered a small smile. Hi, she said softly. I'm Claire. I'm just going to sit here for a while, if that's okay with you. You don't have to talk or anything. I just wanted you to know I'm not going anywhere. Owen stared at her for a long moment. Then, for the first time in months, he spoke. Quiet. Yes, Claire said. It's quiet now. Is that better? The smallest nod. It wasn't much. But it was a beginning. And 3 floors up, an emperor felt something he hadn't felt in years, hope. 3 weeks into her employment, Claire had become the palace joke. She could hear the dragon courtiers laughing as she walked by with her strange human tools and odd methods. They called her the soft one behind her back. Sometimes to her face. She didn't care. Owen was eating breakfast now. That alone was a miracle. The dining hall was where the nobility gathered each morning, a massive space with vaulted ceilings and tables that could seat hundreds. Claire had taken one look at it, seen Owen's panic, and said no. Instead, she'd converted a small side room into what she called a calm space. Soft lighting. Minimal furniture. No reflective surfaces. This is ridiculous, General Thane had said on day 4. The prince must learn to adapt to proper society, not hide from it. He's not hiding, Claire had replied, keeping her voice steady even though the general terrified her. He's regulating. There's a difference. Regulating what? His nervous system. Look, imagine someone's playing 100 songs at once in your head while strobe lights flash in your eyes and someone's scratching their claws on stone right next to your ear. That's what every formal dinner feels like to him. The general had walked away muttering about human nonsense, but Claire noticed he didn't order her to stop. Now she was introducing something even stranger, a visual schedule. She'd made simple cards with pictures showing Owen's day. Wake up. Breakfast. Study time. Free time. Rest. The dragon tutors had tried to force complex academic schedules on him, expecting him to memorize and perform. Claire's system was different. Owen could see what was coming. No surprises. No sudden changes that sent him spiraling. The court thought it was treating him like a baby. Claire thought it was treating him like a person who processed information differently. The biggest fight came over the noise-canceling headphones she'd fabricated using parts from the ship that brought her. They were clunky and definitely not dignified for a prince, but they worked. You are coddling him, Lady Vera, the protocol mistress, had snapped. A dragon prince must be strong. Must endure. He is strong, Claire shot back. He endures more in one formal dinner than you face in a month. These just help him focus on what matters instead of drowning in background noise. Lady Vera had complained to the Emperor, but the complaint went nowhere. Because Emperor Draven was watching everything Claire did with an intensity that made his advisors nervous. He watched her discover that Owen loved star charts. Not just liked them, loved them with a passion that lit up his whole face. Claire spent her own credits ordering advanced stellar mapping programs and spent hours with Owen, letting him show her constellations from dragon mythology, explain gravitational patterns, calculate orbital mechanics in his head faster than computers. He's brilliant, she'd said once to the head scholar who dismissed Owen as mentally deficient. You just never gave him a chance to show it his way. The Emperor watched her create a routine that worked. Owen knew what to expect each day. He had time alone when he needed it. He had deep pressure therapy, which for dragons meant weighted blankets made from materials that could withstand their body heat. He had safe foods, consistent schedules, and someone who listened when he said something was too much. And Owen thrived. He started sleeping through the night. His meltdowns decreased from daily to maybe twice a week, and usually only when something disrupted his routine. He even started making eye contact with Claire, something he rarely did with anyone. The palace staff began to notice. The prince who'd been written off as damaged was asking questions, showing interest in things, even smiling occasionally. It was the smile that got Emperor Draven to finally confront her. Claire was in the garden one evening, her one moment of peace in the long days. The gardens were beautiful, full of plants from across the empire, and she liked to sit by a fountain and just breathe. You are teaching my son human weakness. She jumped at the voice. Emperor Draven stood there, enormous even by dragon standards, his scales almost black in the evening light. His eyes reflected the garden lights like mirrors. Claire stood up, her heart hammering. I'm teaching him coping strategies, Your Majesty. We do not cope. We overcome. With respect, sir, that's not working for him. The words came out before she could stop them. You didn't talk back to emperors. Especially not dragon emperors who could literally breathe fire. But Draven didn't rage. He just stared at her. Explain. Owen's brain works differently. It's not better or worse, just different. He processes sensory information more intensely than most. What's a quiet dinner to you is like standing next to a rocket engine for him. What's bright light to you is like staring at the sun. He's not weak. He's actually incredibly strong to have survived this long in a world that's constantly overwhelming him. You speak of him as if he has a condition. He does. Humans call it autism spectrum disorder. We've known about it for centuries. We've learned how to support people with it, help them thrive instead of just survive. And you believe my advanced empire has missed this? Claire took a breath. This was the dangerous part. I think your empire decided it was easier to eliminate differences than understand them. The silence stretched so long she thought she'd gone too far. Then Draven spoke, his voice quiet. Show me everything you are doing. Everything. I want to understand. It wasn't a request. But as Claire began explaining neurodivergence, sensory processing, the spectrum of human cognition, she realized something. The Emperor wasn't angry. He was listening. Really listening. And somewhere in that conversation, everything began to change. The Imperial Council met every 10 days, and this meeting was the worst yet. Claire didn't attend, of course. Humans weren't allowed in council chambers. But she heard about it from the whispers that echoed through the palace halls. They wanted Owen removed from the line of succession. Declared unfit. Sent away to some remote facility where defective dragons lived out their days in isolation. And they wanted Emperor Draven to choose a new mate, produce a proper heir who could actually lead. Claire felt sick when she heard. She found Owen in his room, arranging his star charts in precise patterns on the floor. He looked up when she entered, and she saw the anxiety in his eyes. He always knew when something was wrong. They're talking about me again, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Yeah, Claire admitted. She'd learned not to lie to him. Owen could always tell, and lies made everything worse. But your father hasn't agreed to anything. He will eventually. Everyone says I'm broken. Claire sat down on the floor across from him, careful not to disturb his charts. You want to know what I think? I think you see patterns nobody else can see. I think you understand things in ways that could change this whole empire if they just listen. Owen's claws traced the edge of a star map. That's not how dragons think. Maybe it should be. The next day, everything changed. An encrypted transmission arrived from the KRYLL Federation, the Empire's oldest enemy. It was a mess of code and mathematical sequences that made no sense. The Empire's best cryptographers had been working on it for 3 days straight. Intelligence suggested it might be coordinates for an attack, but they couldn't crack it. Claire was with Owen in his study room when she overheard 2 guards talking about it outside the door. She glanced at Owen, saw his head tilt in that way that meant he was listening intently. Can I see it? He asked quietly. See what? The code. The transmission. Can I see it? It was insane. A prince who'd been dismissed as mentally incompetent, asking to look at something the Empire's experts couldn't solve. But Claire had watched Owen calculate orbital mechanics for fun. She'd seen him spot patterns in stellar drift that took computers hours to process. She made a decision that could have gotten her executed. 20 minutes later, she talked her way past 3 security checkpoints and stood in front of Emperor Draven's private office. The guards looked ready to throw her out, but she held her ground. I need to speak with the Emperor. It's about the KRYLL transmission. That got her inside. Draven sat behind a massive desk, looking exhausted. General Thane and 2 other advisors were with him, all studying screens covered in indecipherable code. This better be important, Draven said. Let Owen look at it. The room went silent. Then General Thane laughed, harsh and bitter. The human has lost her mind. The prince can barely function in normal society, and you want him to. He can see patterns, Claire interrupted, which was incredibly rude but she didn't care. Mathematical patterns, sequences, things most people miss. Just let him try. What do you have to lose? Our time, Lady Vera said from the corner. And dignity. But Draven was staring at Claire with an expression she couldn't read. Bring him, he said finally. Owen arrived 15 minutes later, wearing his noise-cancelling headphones and gripping Claire's hand so tight it hurt. The council chamber was everything he hated. Bright, loud, full of people. But he looked at the screens, and his eyes went distant in that way that meant he was processing. 7 minutes. That's all it took. It's not one code, Owen said, his voice barely above a whisper. It's 3 layered on top of each other. The middle one is a decoy. The pattern repeats every 4 to 7 characters. If you extract every 3rd sequence and reverse the mathematical operations. His claws flew across the keyboard, faster than Claire had ever seen him move. The screen flickered. Suddenly, clear coordinates appeared. Fleet movements. Attack plans. Everything. How did you? General Thane stared at Owen like he'd never seen him before. The pattern was obvious, Owen said simply. Then he started shaking, overwhelmed by the room, the pressure, everything. Claire immediately led him out, back to the safety of his quiet spaces. But the damage was done. Or rather, the revelation was made. Owen had just saved thousands of lives by spotting what trained analysts couldn't see. That evening, Draven appeared at Claire's quarters. She nearly dropped her tablet when she opened the door. "Walk with me," he said. They walked through the gardens, the Emperor and the human maid. It should have been absurd. It was absurd. But somehow it felt natural. "Tell me about your world," Draven said finally. "Your real world. Not the colonies or the politics. Tell me about Earth." So Claire did. She told him about her childhood, about schools that taught kids to celebrate differences instead of hiding them. About scientists who studied how different brains worked and found beauty in the diversity. About a species that had almost destroyed itself through intolerance but slowly, painfully, learned that their differences made them stronger. "We're not perfect," she admitted. "We still struggle. But we learned that when you eliminate everyone who thinks differently, you lose the people who might solve your biggest problems." Draven was quiet for a long time. "My son saved lives today because he thinks differently." "Yes. And I almost sent him away. You didn't know. Your whole culture didn't know. But now you do." He stopped walking and looked down at her. Even for a dragon, he was massive. But his eyes were gentle. "You are remarkable, Claire Mitchell. My son trusts you more than he ever trusted his own mother. You made me see him as he truly is. You made me question everything I thought I knew about strength." Claire's heart was pounding. "Just doing my job, Your Majesty." "Draven," he said softly. "When we're alone, call me Draven." And in that moment, under 3 alien moons, something shifted between them. Something dangerous and impossible and real. The flame ceremony was in 3 days, and the palace was buzzing with preparation. It was the most important ritual in dragon culture. The emperor would choose a new mate from the noble houses, ensuring the continuation of a strong bloodline. Every eligible female from the warrior caste had arrived, each one more impressive than the last. Claire packed her belongings slowly, carefully folding the few clothes she'd brought from Earth. Her contract would end after the ceremony. It was better this way. She'd gotten too close, too attached. To Owen, certainly. But also to Draven, which was dangerous and stupid and completely impossible. He was an emperor. She was human. Their biology wasn't even compatible. There could never be children, never be a real future. And his empire needed heirs. She understood that. Understanding didn't make it hurt less. "You're leaving." Owen stood in her doorway, his voice flat but his eyes showing the panic underneath. "After the ceremony, yes. But you'll be fine. I've trained 3 new attendants in my methods. They understand how to help you now. And your father listens to you now. Things are different. You promised you weren't going anywhere." Claire's throat tightened. She had said that first day. "I know. I'm sorry. But sometimes grown-ups have to break promises even when they don't want to." Owen turned and ran. She heard his door slam 3 corridors away. The flame ceremony was held in the Great Hall, a space so massive it could fit a small city inside. Claire stood in the back with the other servants, watching as Draven sat on his throne. One by one, the candidates approached. Each was stunning, powerful, deadly. Each would make a perfect dragon empress. Claire watched Draven's face as he spoke with them. Professional. Distant. And when they were introduced to Owen, who stood beside the throne in formal robes he clearly hated, Claire saw their reactions. Dismissal. Barely concealed disgust. One even suggested that with a proper mother, Owen might still be salvaged. Draven's expression went cold at that. The ceremony was supposed to end with a choice. Instead, Draven stood and spoke words that sent shockwaves through the hall. "I choose none of these candidates. Instead, I announce reforms to this empire. We will establish programs for dragons whose minds work differently than the majority. We will integrate what humans call neurodiversity training into our military academies and schools. And I formally name Prince Owen as my heir, supported by his advisor, Claire Mitchell, who will hold a permanent position in this court." The hall erupted. Shouting, arguments, outrage. Claire stood frozen in shock. General Thane stepped forward, his face twisted in fury. "You would destroy tradition for a damaged prince and a human? You are unfit to rule." That's when Claire realized this wasn't just about tradition. This was a coup. She saw the assassins move before anyone else did. Years of working with kids had given her sharp instincts for danger. 3 dragons in servant clothes, moving toward Owen while everyone was distracted by the chaos. Claire ran. She didn't think, just moved. She reached Owen a heartbeat before the first assassin did, shoving him behind a pillar. The assassin's claws slashed where Owen's throat had been a second before. "Run!" she screamed at Owen. "Your father's chambers, now." But Owen was frozen, locked in panic and sensory overload. The noise, the chaos, everything was too much. So Claire did the only thing she could. She fought. She wasn't a warrior. She was a therapist from Earth who'd never thrown a punch in her life. But she was also a human who'd evolved as a persistence predator, and she was protecting a child she loved. She grabbed a ceremonial star from the wall and swung it with everything she had. The first assassin went down, surprised that prey fought back. The second lunged at her. She dodged, using the pillars and furniture, staying mobile. Dragons were stronger, but she was smaller, faster in tight spaces. She'd studied their movements for months while working with Owen. The third assassin got past her defenses. Claws raked across her side, pain exploding through her ribs. She felt something tear, felt warm blood soaking her clothes. But she stayed between the assassin and Owen, staff raised, teeth bared in a very human expression of defiance. Then Draven was there. She'd never seen him truly angry before. His roar shook the pillars. Fire erupted from his throat, not the ceremonial flames of tradition but real, incinerating heat. The assassins didn't stand a chance. The whole descended into violence. Loyalists against rebels. But Draven's personal guard was better trained, and the coup collapsed quickly. General Thane was arrested along with a dozen other conspirators. Through the chaos, Claire's legs gave out. The adrenaline was fading, and she was suddenly aware of how badly she was hurt. She slumped against the pillar, vision going gray at the edges. Draven caught her before she hit the ground. His scales were hot from the fire, but his touch was impossibly gentle. "Stay with me," he commanded, and it wasn't an emperor speaking. It was something much more personal. "Owen," she managed to whisper. "Is he safe? Because of you. You saved him." "Just doing my job," she said, the same words she'd said in the garden. But they both knew it was more than that now. "You threw yourself between my son and trained assassins. You have no combat training, no natural weapons, no chance of winning. You did it anyway." His voice cracked slightly. "Why?" Claire's vision was fading, but she managed a weak smile. "Because his mine too. And you don't abandon family." The last thing she saw before unconsciousness took her was Draven's face, scales wet with something that looked remarkably like tears. And somewhere in the chaos, Owen's voice rose above the noise, "Don't let her die. Please don't let her die." Claire woke up 3 days later in the Royal Medical Wing, which was apparently the dragon equivalent of being told you were very important or very close to dying. Possibly both. Her side was wrapped in something that looked like glowing bandages but felt warm and tingly. A dragon medic explained that their regeneration technology was centuries ahead of human medicine. The claw wounds that should have taken months to heal would be gone in 2 weeks. "Lucky for you, humans are biologically compatible with our treatments," the medic said. "Your cellular structure is surprisingly adaptable." The first visitor was Owen. He crept into the room like he was afraid she might disappear, his noise-canceling headphones on and his favorite star chart clutched in his claws. "I thought you died," he said quietly, not making eye contact. "Takes more than that to get rid of me," Claire said, trying to sound cheerful even though everything hurt. "Father said you were very brave. But also very stupid because humans are fragile and you could have gotten killed." "Your father's not wrong." Owen finally looked at her. "I don't want you to leave. I'm not going anywhere, buddy. I promise. And this time I mean it." He nodded, then carefully placed the star chart on her bedside table. It was his favorite one, the map of Earth's solar system from the observation deck. He never let anyone touch it. "You can look at this while you get better. It helps me feel calm. Maybe it will help you too." After he left, Claire stared at the chart and tried very hard not to cry. Draven came that evening, after the medical staff had changed shifts. He looked tired, older somehow, though she wasn't sure how you aged when you were covered in scales. "The council wants to give you a medal," he said, settling into a chair that was far too small for him. "For bravery in defense of the air." "That's nice. I told them a medal wasn't enough." He was quiet for a long moment, and Claire waited. She'd learned that Draven needed time to process his thoughts, not unlike his son. "My empire has existed for 3,000 years, he said finally. "We conquered worlds, built fleets that could darken suns, created technology that seemed like magic. And in all that time, we never once thought to ask if strength was the only thing that mattered." You're being too hard on yourself. Am I? We would have killed Owen if he'd been born to a lesser family. We would have eliminated him as defective. And we would have lost someone who sees the universe in ways that save thousands of lives. He looked at her directly. You taught me that. A human from a species we considered weak and primitive taught me the most important lesson of my life. Humans aren't that great either, Claire said. We had to learn these lessons the hard way. We spent thousands of years hurting people who were different before we figured out that different was okay. But you did learn. And now you're teaching us. The conversation turned to practical matters. The coup had been crushed, but it exposed deep problems in the empire. Nearly a third of the noble houses had supported the rebellion, all of them clinging to old ideas about purity and strength. Draven was implementing reforms, but it would take time. And there's the matter of succession, he said carefully. Claire's chest tightened. Right. You still need to choose a mate. Someone who can give you proper heirs. That's what the council says. They're not wrong. The empire needs stability. The empire needs to change. Draven leaned forward. Claire, there are no easy answers here. By our law, I should choose a dragon mate. Produce heirs. Continue the bloodline. But there's another law, one older than the succession rules. The law of chosen bond. I don't understand. When a dragon claims someone as family, not by blood but by choice, that bond is considered sacred. More binding than marriage or bloodline. Owen invoked it yesterday during a council session. Claire's eyes widened. What did he say? He gave his first formal address to the full Imperial Council. Without prompting. Without preparation. He stood up and said that his mother by birth had abandoned him, but you chose to stay. That by ancient law, a bond of choice is stronger than a bond of blood. He claimed you as his parent. The tears came then, and Claire didn't try to stop them. It's a legal technicality, Draven continued. But it works. You are now, officially, a member of the Imperial family. Not as a servant. Not as a hire. As Owen's chosen mother, which gives you status and protection and a permanent place in this court. And you? Claire asked quietly. Where do you fit in this? Draven reached out slowly, carefully, and took her hand. His scales were warm, his touch gentle despite the strength she knew he possessed. I have a choice to make, he said. I can do what's expected. Choose a dragon mate, have more children, maintain tradition. Or I can choose something different. Choose a partner who showed me that compassion is strength, that understanding is power, that love matters more than bloodline. We can't have children, Claire whispered. No. But we can raise Owen, and maybe change an empire. We can build something that matters more than genetics. Unless. He hesitated, and for the first time she saw uncertainty in his eyes. Unless you want to return to Earth. I would understand. I would make sure you had everything you needed, and you could visit Owen whenever. I'm staying. Claire. I'm staying, Draven. I'm staying with Owen. I'm staying with you. I'm staying to watch this empire learn what humanity took centuries to figure out. That the people who are different, who think differently, who see the world from another angle, those are the people who change everything. 6 months later, Claire stood in a crowd outside a brand new building on the palace grounds. The Empire's first neurodiversity center, the sign read in both dragon script and human languages. Owen stood beside her, confident in a way she'd never seen before. He was giving tours to families, explaining how the center worked, how they had quiet rooms and sensory spaces and programs designed for dragons whose brains worked like his. We're not broken, he told a young dragon girl who was clearly overwhelmed by the crowd. We just process differently. And that's okay. My mom taught me that. He meant Claire. She was officially his chosen mother now, recognized by imperial law. And she was also, quietly and without much ceremony, Draven's partner. The Empire was still adjusting to that idea, but they were adjusting. Draven stood beside her, watching his son teach others with obvious pride. Do you ever regret it? He asked quietly. Staying here instead of going home? Claire thought about Earth, about the life she'd left behind. Then she looked at Owen, thriving and happy. She looked at the families entering the center, hope on their faces. She looked at Draven, this emperor who'd learned to question everything he thought he knew. I am home, she said simply. And somewhere in the human territories, word was spreading about a therapist who'd changed an empire. About how humanity's greatest strength wasn't weapons or technology, but the simple revolutionary idea that every mind had value. That different didn't mean less. That compassion could reshape galaxies. It was the most human thing imaginable, taking something broken and making it whole. Not by force, but by understanding. That was the real power. And the universe was starting to notice.